Hey guys, Nala's here. In this video I'm going to describe what Crowfall is. It's a sandbox, PvP, throne war simulator, MMORPG based on guild versus guild and campaigns. And wait, cut. Sorry, it's not going to be that kind of video. Welcome to my 200 subscriber special on Crowfall and what makes it different than other MMORPGs. A lot of people don't understand what Crowfall is and what it's going to be. I get a lot of YouTube comments. It looks like a MOBA. This game doesn't look big. This game is this game is that. There's a lot of Crowfall videos out there trying to explain what it is and what it will be. But I feel like they're missing some very important parts to understanding the game. So I'm here to elaborate and give some history. Hopefully, it helps. To know what Crowfall is and will be, we have to go back to 2003. A game called Shadowbane was released. Shadowbane is very much so the predecessor of Crowfall. So what was Shadowbane and what did it entail? To me, Shadowbane was the best MMORPG PvP sandbox game to date. It included a colossal amount of character customization. You had 12 races to choose from, 4 base classes, fighter, healer, mage, and rogue, and there were 22 classes to choose from, ranging anywhere from assassin to wizard. Not only that, but different classes could be various base classes. So you could be a mage or healer channeler. Depending on your base class, you would have either mage or healer based skills. So a healing channeler had access to things like heals and a shield, while the mage class had access to more powerful casting stances and spells. Character creation also had a lot of depth, including the ability to manipulate your starting stats and add starting runes. The amount of character customization was the closest thing I've seen to Dungeons & Dragons and a lot of old school pen and paper RPGs and MUDs. I don't think I've seen another game even touch it as far as complexity when it comes to character customization. On top of that, there were also things called disciplines and stat runes. All of these things were restricted by your previous choices. Discipline runes were extra customization you could add to your character later on in the game. They would add a certain amount of skills, some very distinct skills. For instance, there was the bounty hunter discipline. It added the skill to be able to track other players in a certain distance around your character. It would open a window displaying a UI element which would show a list of characters around you. Okay? You could then select a character's name, track them, and an arrow would pop up showing their direction. And then you could follow it to find where they were. And if they were stealthed, you could either reveal them or try to AoE them out of stealth. The system was so intricate that even years after initial release, players were finding new combinations that were very powerful. So, with Crowfall, we're also going to see a very intricate character customization system, not only including races, classes, and disciplines, but the necromancy system, where you'll be able to craft your own vessel or character, making them more potent, which is really cool and very new. So, now that we've gone over the character customization in Shadowbane and in Crowfall, I'm going to describe the world of Shadowbane and what it involved. So, it wasn't your standard MMORPG, right? It didn't have any quests. It was very much based off of player interaction. The way you leveled in the game was purely from killing mobs in the world. And there were zones in the world which had various types of mob spawns for different levels. The way you leveled was, like I said, killing the mobs and zones. It was a massive non-instance world. There were no instances. It would take you probably 2 to 3 hours to run from one side of the biggest continent to the other. Each zone had its own biome. There were swamps, deserts, undead plains, volcanic demonic zones, and more. You would also get all of your crafting elements from killing mobs and taking mines. Alright. You'll be able to see on the map there's a bunch of shields. The shields are player-owned cities built from the ground up. Each zone had a certain amount of space for a number of these cities. It wasn't like Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer Online, and Guild Wars 2. Those games are very static, whereas Shadowbane's keeps could be taken permanently or just wiped off the face of the map. So, first, your guild would have to farm for your Tree of Life to reserve your city in a zone. Then you could build up your forges, which you would make gear, your walls, your banks, your trainers, your spires, and more. The way that crafting worked in Shadowbane was very different than other games as well. You needed to actually build a forge, and then you would add a deed of a certain type of NPC. So you could have Dwarven heavy armors, Lizard Man heavy armors, or Elf, etc. And each of them had the ability to make different types of gear. So getting a specific type of crafting NPC deed was pretty sweet when you got it off a mob. Alright. So then you could roll gear through your NPC smithy, and it would use gold or resources that you found in the world to do so. Alright. So those shields, guild built cities got built up so people couldn't just get into your city, right? You could add spires that would do things like make it so flyers couldn't fly over your walls, or people with teleport couldn't teleport inside of your city. You could get guards to patrol your city and attack people who were known as hostile. So once you took all this time to build your city and craft your own gear, at that point the guild had its own home. When you logged in, you were there with your friends. You could make your own gear. You could plan things out. That was one of my favorite parts about Shadowbane, right? Okay. So it brings us to the next integral part of Crowfall and Shadowbane, is player and guild conflict. Just like in real life, conflicts came up between nations and guilds. Let's say Guild A and Guild B occupy the same zone. They've been peaceful towards each other so far, right? Guild A has a group out right now XPing off of a certain mob spawn, farming materials. And then suddenly Guild B decides to swoop in, wipe their group, take all their materials and gold. Okay, so they ganked your people and took all your loots, basically. Suddenly, the peaceful relationship is now escalating into full-out war. So Guild A, they decide they want to take Guild B's city and eradicate them off the map. How that worked was the guild dropped something called a Bane Stone on the Guild B's city. Now their entire keep and work is at risk to be lost. The players set a time for when the stone would go active. When it's active, the defending guild would have to destroy the Bane Stone to make their buildings protected once more. If they didn't destroy the stone, and the attacking guild destroyed their Tree of Life, it brings us to the next and final phase. They would then take ownership of the city permanently or until it was taken again. So you can see that there were high stakes involved in the player versus player environment. Nations were crushed, rebuilt, and rearmed. Some would just falter and scatter to the four winds. So making an open sandbox PvP MMORPG can be made fun and engaging by using simple player objectives or items that people want in the world, right? A lot of games try to overcomplicate this when in reality it can be quite easy to create. Nation battles were just one of the objectives in Shadowbane like this. I mentioned the discipline runes before, and there were also mines and rare gear droppers in the world. To acquire a discipline, basically you would have to go to where the discipline dropper is in one of the zones. They had different droppers in different zones. Some had 2 or 3 in the world. And once there, you had to find the named mob that had the discipline. So then you would have to kill the mob and compete with other players over it. It was also a timed spawn, so it wasn't freely available all the time. Some of the most epic PvP encounters revolved around this. Let's say you're playing a thief class, right? Which has the ability to steal items out of people's inventories, which was awesome. And you can be stealth, so you're sitting around waiting for a discipline dropper to spawn, and suddenly a skirmish breaks out between a bunch of players, right? 2 groups are fighting over the location and the dropper spawn. One group fails to defeat the other group, and then the first group, suddenly the discipline dropper pops up and they start to attack the mob. They kill the mob, and you swoop in with your stealth and steal it from somebody's backpack, their inventory, right? So everything's happy-go-lucky now. You're off with your discipline rune, and you're laughing to yourself because you just stole it from somebody. And right as you're getting away, you get popped out of stealth by a scout. He kills you, he takes the rune, and he's gone. The rare gear droppers worked the same way pretty much, with the named mobs in the world. Next, we have the mine system. Once controlled, you would funnel the resources from your mine to your city. Once a day, the mine had a window of time of opportunity. It would go live, and someone could come and take the mine from your guild. Some of the mines had really rare resources and were heavily contested daily. And this was a huge aspect when it came to guild spec groups, which were groups made specifically to counter or fight other guilds or specs. So one day you could see a Shade Warlock group, the next day you could find a Prelate group and such. It really made for really interesting stuff. And some with the discipline runes, I'd say probably the most epic encounters I've had in PvP have been from that. The most recent thing I could compare it to is games like Rust and H1Z1, where you have your airdrops. So it's just like it's an objective out in the world that people want to fight over, right? Alright, so let's talk about where did Shadowbane fail. The game did eventually get shut down. Okay. But there were so many hardcore fans of the game that they went to reverse engineer and make emulators for the game that are actually live today. Game shut down after time, and here are some of the reasons why. Basically, Shadowbane was such an innovative and creative game at the time that it was bound to have some downfalls, right? Some of these problems are going to relate to why Crowfall is being made the way it is today, trying to avoid these problems. Alright, so I talked about cities and nations fighting for dominance. So let's say Guild A took over Guild B's cities. Guild B is falling out. They want a city again, so they decide to join Guild A. After a while, you would have small amounts of nations that dominate the whole server. As you can imagine, that becomes very stale. So what they started to do was add servers that had reset cycles on them every few months. Okay? They'd have a certain period of time and then reset. So this is how Crowfall's campaign system will work when the game is released. After a time, the victor of the campaign wins, Everything in that campaign is reset. The most fun I've had in games like this is the start of new servers, really. Everyone's trying to get up in resources so they can make a badass city and put it in a great spot. The early fights in this phase of the game have always been the most fun to me. And although the campaigns will reset, your character and Eternal Kingdom will not. So, Eternal Kingdoms are basically your own personal area. You can build anything from plains to forests to massive cityscapes. It can also be open to the public and have PvP enabled. Right now in Crowfall, Eternal Kingdoms are very popular for dueling and things like organized group fights and such. The next thing that was a pretty huge downfall was there was a ton of griefing in Shadowbane, and there was only one way, and that was full PvP and loot drop. The different campaigns in Crowfall will have various rule sets which will cater to different playstyles, making the game more accessible to everybody. For example, my first server in Shadowbane was a Scorn server. My nation was we were just ruthless. We patrolled the whole map, slaying anybody we could find, and it was dead. It was dead in about 2 months, the population, because people just didn't want to play with us anymore. And there were also a lot of holes in the game, making cheating very rampant in the beginning of the release of the game. The next thing I want to talk about is hardware limitations. Now, let's remember this game was released in 2003. Shadowbane was one massive map with no instances, and the ability to have hundreds, if not thousands, of players at once fighting on the same screen. This resulted in the infamous SB.exe crash. It wasn't able to handle the full potential until a few years after the release, really. And now it's 2017. There have been multiple games that can handle this type of content, so we should be fine in that realm as well. So basically, Crowfall is taking what worked and didn't work in games like Shadowbane and improving on it. Cycling campaigns, various rule sets, and it's 2017, so our hardware is very capable of handling large fights. And also, cheating is probably, that's minimized these days as well. And as you can see, when someone newer to the genre, sees videos or reads about the game, it's kind of hard to fully explain what it's about without going into detail about what Shadowbane was. That's why I made this video. So, what's available right now in Crowfall as of June 2017? Let's go over it. The game's in pre-alpha stage. Currently, there's a small server that's focused on 3-faction PvP for testing PvP. There's a larger map that's free-for-all PvP. And then there's Eternal Kingdoms, your own private server and housing that you can make public or enable PvP. It's currently focusing on combat and crafting tests. The crafting system in the game is going to be huge and intricate, and it already is, pretty much. Crowfall features a time-based leveling system similar to EVE Online. You're able to train one global skill, such as combat, crafting, or exploration, and then you can train one skill in each class, up to 3 classes at a time. So basically, you could train some crafting, and then you could train some druid skills, or some duelist skills, and some knight skills at the same time. I like the time-based leveling system a lot, because it doesn't dictate what you have to do to level up. You don't have to go around killing tons of mobs to level up your combat. You just pop in some combat skills, go head out and gather and craft if you want, right? Just like EVE Online. Right now, I think you can buy into the game for $69 USD. And I think that will give you access to be able to test the game right now. What will Crowfall be on its completion? Let's talk about that. As for the finished game, Crowfall will feature 4 or more cycling PvP campaigns with various rule sets, a complex, highly customizable character building aspect, the ability to build your own personal internal kingdom that will exist throughout the campaigns. In this type of game, you create your own story through playing the game. Will you be a tyrant hell-bent on destruction? A lawful and helpful hero trying to restore order? Or a neutral character just trying to survive in a world of chaos? You can play the game however you want. Okay? Is it worth supporting the game and buying into it early? Is another question I get asked a lot. That depends on a lot of factors. If you like sandbox PvP MMORPGs and want to support some of the best developers in the genre, you could get in early and start learning and forging the game through feedback. Then I would say yes, if that interests you. The game's still early in development, so some of the things I covered here are able to be changed, right? If that doesn't sound quite like you, then hold back and just keep an eye on it. I've been testing this game for 1.5 years now and will be covering it for the foreseeable future. I made this video because of the feedback I've been getting from YouTube and Twitch. I felt I needed to really nail down what Crowfall is, so I hope it helped you. Of course, remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and follow me over on twitch.tv/Inalis. I hope to see you there. Until next time, have luck, good fun, and peace out.